This is Sky News with Martin Stanford.
Good evening to you. This is Sky News at 8. It looks like one of the biggest football clubs in the world, Manchester United, could be about to sack its manager, David Moyes. There's been no official comment yet, but sources say bosses are expected to end his contract in the coming hours following a disastrous first season in charge at Old Trafford.
A hell of a step up to manage Manchester United. He wasn't good enough. When Real Madrid wanted a manager, they went for Ancelotti, who'd won things here and in Italy. When Bayern Munich wanted a manager, they went for Pep Guardiola, whose Barcelona dominated Europe for about 3 or 4 years. When Manchester United wanted a successor to Sir Alex Ferguson, they got a manager who had never won anything.
We've got some big names in that Manchester United dressing room, drawing colossal salaries. Where have they been all season long? You know, Manchester United, it's a global brand. It's one of the biggest clubs in the world. They have people on call the whole time, and we have not heard a word from anyone from Old Trafford. I think the silence is deafening. It's a shame for David Moyes that it looks like ending this way. I guess they'll turn to Ryan Giggs for the last handful of games, which, you know, are meaningless now. Let's be honest. And when's the last time in a quarter of a century that Manchester United have had meaningless games at the end of a season? You know, it's a real shame for Moyes, but I guess they will regroup, rebuild. The new manager, whoever he is when he comes in the summer, if it is Jurgen Klopp, will have a colossal war chest to spend, and let's see what happens then. But I think a lot of players at Old Trafford tonight should be looking at themselves as well as looking at David Moyes.
Well, of course, everybody heard the rumours sort of early this afternoon, and a few fans came down here to Old Trafford, really, to ask journalists if we'd heard when or if this announcement was going to be made. Of course, anyone you speak to, any fan, any journalist has their own speculation about what may or may not be going on behind closed doors. But I think, you know, if these rumours prove to be true, if David Moyes is about to be shown the door, I don't think it will come as any huge surprise to the fans.
I think the supporters have been fantastic to David Moyes, and David Moyes has acknowledged it. I think, though, that it's a results-based industry, and so far the results have been very, very poor. And whether David succeeds or fails will entirely be down to the results.
We're hearing so many interesting stories now about how the players were sniggering behind his back and just had no respect for their manager. And the most important thing as a football manager is keep your staff on side, keep your players on side, and it looks like he failed to. And I think that's translated in results on the pitch.
Well, you can see that in every possible metric their numbers are down from last season. I
think United would have accepted a transitional season, say if they'd finished 4th or even 5th, but to be 7th in the league, to be so far off the top, I think it was impossible for Moyes. And they got to a stage where they had to ask, can we trust this guy to spend 150 million plus in the transfer market in the summer? And I don't think they could.
David Moyes was the chosen one, but not everybody was convinced.
Was he really the badly chosen one?
They should have been able to get anybody they wanted from the world of football, not someone who's kind of a straightforward, Fergie clone type person. They need someone to come in and have a complete clear out in terms of style and different coaches, somebody looking at transfer strategy, kind of a bit like they do at City, frankly.
He's also, I think, behind the scenes, United has become a really quite difficult place to work, and there's been a pretty poisonous atmosphere, a difficult atmosphere among senior players at the training ground, and even within the boardroom. It has not been a happy ship.
This is Sky News with Dermot Murnahan.
Good morning, and the breaking news this morning is that Manchester United have sacked David Moyes after less than a season in charge. The club confirmed the move on Twitter a short time ago. They said Manchester United announces that David Moyes has left the club. The club would like to place on record its thanks for the hard work, honesty and integrity he brought to the role. Our sports correspondent Paul Kelso is at Old Trafford. So hard work, honesty and integrity weren't enough.
Moyes made some interesting decisions when he first came to Manchester United. He dismissed a lot of Ferguson's staff in the coaching department, and that caused some controversy among the players. I think the likes of René Moulenstein, who left the club, were very well thought of by the current playing squad. And Moyes brought in 10 staff from Everton, from Goodison Park, so that was quite a change for everyone in the first team squad to deal with. And from that moment on, there was a sense that once those results started to go against him and those doubts perhaps started to creep into one or two minds in the dressing room, that kind of thing spreads quite quickly in a football dressing room. If one player is brave enough to say privately something behind the manager's back, then that kind of thing can spread quite quickly if a manager doesn't get a grip on it quickly and doesn't start winning games.
A club that's crying out for leadership, for a strong, charismatic senior figure. It doesn't have to be the manager. It needs to be someone in that boardroom who can take control of this club, end the fractious dressing room. We've got fractious employees complaining about the manager. That never happened under Ferguson. And for a club of this stature, it can't happen. But they need a leader to do that. Quite interesting. Ed Wood was the chief executive. He's new in the job. David Gill, who did the job for many years alongside Sir Alex Ferguson, he also stepped down. He would have been a figure who could provide that leadership. So perhaps you look to the owners. Well, they're absentees. The Glazer family haven't given an interview or spoken directly to the media since 2005. They've had a huge campaign over the years here from the supporters to get rid of them. They're deeply unpopular, so they're not on site to provide that leadership. So this is a really crucial time for United.
I think in an ideal world it would be better if they'd stuck with him for a lot longer. I mean, after all, that's what Ferguson said. Less than a year ago, on the pitch, stood on the pitch and said, you will stick with David Moyes through thick and thin. Well, the fans were listening, but the owners weren't.
So you think this is solely the work of the owners?
Yes. I mean, I think they're driven, the Glazers are driven by the market. The former regime of Manchester United with Martin Edwards, Sir Bobby Charlton, much more powerful. They could see that Ferguson, if we go back a quarter of a century, was making progress behind the scenes. They stuck with him. The crowd at Old Trafford at one stage had reached 23,000, and yet they still stuck with Ferguson. And as I say, I do repeat, in an ideal world.
I must say I'm absolutely delighted.
I'm glad he's gone because I didn't want him manager when he was appointed. I think
This is no longer just a talking point in Manchester, it matters in Kenya.
I'm happy because we need results at the end of the day.
And in Singapore.
Most of my friends have been quite happy that he's been sacked.
And that's why United's failure to qualify for the Champions League is so important to the owners.
There's the revenue that you generate from being in the competition, roughly about £50 million a year, but also it enhances the brand. So it allows Manchester United to sell themselves as one of the top teams in Europe, and that means that commercial revenues flow in, not only from Europe, but from around the globe.
Stuart Flinders, BBC North West Tonight, Old Trafford.
Well, I'm joined now by Duncan Drasdo, the Chief Executive of the Manchester United Supporters Trust. Duncan, do you think that David Moyes did fail here, or was he made a scapegoat for certain things that were beyond his control?
Well, I mean, I think it's a cliche that football's a results-based business, but certainly the results weren't good, and in the end, the person who pays the price if the results aren't right is always the manager. And so whether it was his fault or not, that's the way it works in football.
Not only had he led United out of Europe and the club to its lowest points total in Premier League history, but the manager of one of England's most proud clubs was becoming a figure of ridicule.
Last summer when he took the job, I think the chief executive didn't get the deals done that he wanted. A lot of negativity, they had a slow start and had no momentum. I think it's a shame. I think he should have been given more time. I think some of the players at Man United should be ashamed of themselves. I think they really let him down.
One of the big criticisms since the very early days that he took over was that he was an Everton manager who didn't believe he was a Manchester United manager. When you saw him walk out of the tunnel at Old Trafford, he seemed a little bit overawed at the club. Very early on, there was at the club tour to Australia, and he was heard on a microphone really expressing the word wow when a video montage of what Manchester United had achieved over the years played. And that's really not a Manchester United manager's characteristics. They see the big job, but they go in there battling. We are better than the rest. We are going to create this fortress. And that's really where he fell down. He alienated some of the top players very early on. He got rid of all of Sir Alex's established backroom staff like Mike Phelan and Rina Meulenstein, who were so important in training, and they had the ear of the senior players. And by getting rid of them from the word go, then saying he needed lots of players in the transfer window, yet failing to get them, that was very demoralising for the current players. So really, from the word go, he's not done the job that was expected of him.
Manchester United comes under huge pressure from its shareholders, with nearly £400 million of debt and multi-million-pound losses in each of the past 2 years. Failing to qualify for the Champions League could cost the club up to £50 million in lost revenue, all of which has contributed to recent falls in United's share price, which recovered lately and actually jumped today by 1.5% as trading began.
Those investors did not invest in a team that would not be competing in the Champions League. They always have been in the Champions League. It was a reasonable expectation they always would be. And so for the Glazers, who still control 90% of the club, they really had to act now to make sure that this doesn't turn out to be a permanent downward spiral.
So for the Glazers, trusting Moyes with a £150 million transfer kitty was a leap of faith too far, which is why tonight Old Trafford is left in an unusual place, facing short-term uncertainty.
Steve, I suppose the important thing now is rebuilding the brand as quickly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's completely dependent on what happens on the pitch. On the face of it, Manchester United have given themselves a bit of breathing space, but in reality that's not really the case, because the player signing season has already begun. Clubs don't just go out in the summer and spend millions of pounds. That process has started now. The problem, of course, for United is they don't have a new manager, so how can they pick the targets that the new manager wants?
Well, former Manchester United striker Dwight Yorke feels this is the right time for Ryan Giggs to step up.
He's 40 years of age. For me, I think with this 4 games, we'll see probably the players playing a little bit more togetherness and getting the results and playing a certain way, a brand of football which is more eye-catching, the Man United way. And I feel that Ryan Giggs is the right person.
Let's go to the Manchester United training ground. Becky Johnson is there. Have you seen or heard from any of the players, Becky?
Yeah, we've seen quite a few of the players going in here this morning. Training was due to start around 10 o'clock. Of course, there'll be no ordinary training session anymore, given this news that we've heard this morning. We have, in the last couple of hours, see Wayne Rooney go in, Rio Ferdinand, Hernandez, Vidic, also Marouane Fellaini went in. One wonders how he must be feeling. He brought in by David Moyes from Moyes' old club Everton, and widely seen to not have really performed for Manchester United. You know, you'd really love to be a fly on the wall inside the Carrington training ground this morning. It's here that we understand that David Moyes was informed in person by the club's chief executive this morning that he was no longer going to be managing Manchester United. We've seen no sign of him. The rumour is actually, we've heard from a number of members of staff that he might have gone in even earlier than 5 o'clock this morning. As you can probably see behind me, a large number of media here, and media been here since around 5 and nobody's seen any sign of him. Of course, I don't think this will have come as a surprise to David Moyes. The rumours were around circulating widely since yesterday afternoon.
For the club, finding a credible permanent replacement is a priority. Holland manager Louis van Gaal, Carlo Ancelotti of Real Madrid and Giggs himself are potential candidates. They'll need to avoid making the same mistakes as Moyes.
You could sense fans had lost patience, even though they didn't show it in games. Individually, fans were losing patience with David Moyes. The players clearly weren't playing for him. I think, you know, people might say it's been a bit knee-jerk, but I think the club have given plenty of time to turn the situation around. In modern-day football, he's had plenty of time.
I mean, Fergie was there for a long time, so, you know, and it takes a lot for someone else to settle in after him having such a good career, really.
I think it's kind of what the fans wanted, but we didn't really expect it as well, because he was on such a long-term contract.
He's not been given the chance to develop into the role. He's got in there. He's obviously a good manager. He's got a track record at other clubs, and I think he should have been given that chance.
But for whoever is in charge, escaping the shadow of you-know-who will be the first hurdle. Paul Kelso, Sky News.